All right, hi, I'm Colin McComb. I'm the creative lead on Broken Roads. I got this position because, strangely enough, Craig hit me up on Discord. He liked me enough with my previous projects, which were like, Fallout 2, Planescape Torment, Torment Tides of Numenera, and he thought that that was a pretty good resume, and he said, I would really love for you to come work on this game. I'm like, I don't know, and he said, it's post-apocalyptic philosophy. And I said, you son of a bitch, I'm in. So that's, I basically sort of helping do the world building, overall vision, and keeping the cats in a rough herd.
Your cats? Your 3 cats?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm Leanne Taylor-Giles. I'm the narrative director on Broken Roads, and I joined the project because I worked with Colin on Tides of Numenera, and he contacted me and said, do you know these guys in Australia? They're really cool. You should probably talk to them. And then I talked to them, and then I quit my job at Ubisoft and joined Broken Roads. So it was a pretty productive conversation. Colin's least favorite. Colin McComb is one of my video game heroes, and he is the reason that I got into the industry. And why I was very excited to work with him on Tides of Numenera. Was, yes. No, it was terrible, just terrible. Very enjoyable experience. Absolutely got to flex all of my branching dialogue muscles that I hadn't really had the chance to fully unwind before then, despite having written a master's about how to design the systems. The actual practice and ability to work with industry legends was phenomenal.
As for me, geez, I started writing when I was very small. And, playing, I think the early Ultima games taught me, oh my god, you can do so much more with games than just hitting them, hitting monsters. And it sort of opened up a whole new world for me. So, I went into writing Dungeons and Dragons stuff officially straight out of college. And from there, it just sort of took off into computer games.
My Planescape box sets just arrived today from Canada, so
awesome.
I'm slowly completing the collection. Thank you for Planes of Lore, and now I think I've got a couple left. But Hellbound, I found Hellbound Blood War at a local flea market in Brisbane, Australia, in the middle of Astley, where no one ever goes, and I had already just played Planescape Torment, and I picked it up and went, wait, there's more? And just devoured that whole thing. So.
Nice. Yeah, super proud of that still. Whew, boy, that's a big question, man. Because I'm like a lot of people. I've got the attention span of a goldfish. So it's whatever I was playing last. But the ones that inspired me, surprisingly, like Half-Life, I think is very well written. Despite the fact that there's almost no real dialogue, the way it's structured, you inhabit the character of this person, and it just becomes like a full immersive experience. I think that was one of the earliest ones I can remember where I just so totally in a character who had been defined for me.
Good response. I have not played Half-Life, but I did play Planescape Torment, obviously. So I think that one's very well written, but I'm not allowed to talk about that.
Not either. I can't say it. It's like, yes, well done.
That's right. I just reach through the camera and pat it on the back.
Thank you.
Other games that I really enjoy are Transistor by Supergiant Games. I think is a good combination of mechanics and writing. A lot of my favorites are things that use the mechanics of the game to tell the story and often involve the player. So in Transistor, it depends on where you put a skill, and then you need to use it a certain amount to unlock the story behind that skill, which is also a person, which is beautiful. And games like Until Dawn, which is, a cinematic horror movie, but you can see your own reaction whenever there's a jump scare. If you have the PlayStation camera, it records you. And I love the additional layer of seeing myself not reacting at all, and my husband and my friend in the background jumping at me, just going, what happened? Like, this is how I discovered I'm not fun to watch horror movies with, because I just sit there and go, huh? So anything that brings the player into telling the story, that it's based on their actions in a manner that they would be doing anyway, because it's mechanically interesting, that's my favorite kind of game.
Yeah. I will add that, now that I've had a chance to think about it, I really enjoyed the hell out of Horizon Zero Dawn. And then also recently Hades. That really stood out to me with just the way the story unfolded as I kept dying and rebuilding, and it just, the various actions I took within it and making the people in there come to me. It was like I was not expecting a sort of role-playing game with actual reactivity in a roguelike. That's in part it's down to the fact that we have to learn to communicate well with each other. And we establish something that we call Rule Zero, which is basically we have to assume that the other person means well. And it's hard to put into practice, but it is absolutely 100% worth the payoff on it, because there are times that I have made mistakes and people have been very forgiving of it because Rule Zero, and they're awesome because this is a good team. But as far as the processes go, we basically we have Slack meetings. The North American writers have a meeting every morning. When Leanne was a North American, she would meet up with us. But now she's an Australian, so we only get to see her a couple times. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Return to your homeland. But otherwise, it's well, I guess I'll let Leanne do it because she's the one who's really helped build the processes here.
Yeah, I'm big on documentation. I'm big on task tracking, making sure that we know what everyone is working on at any set time and that we're working on things that have a synergy between them. So if we want to get from point A to point B, I make sure we can do all the things in the middle. So we have a lot of documentation that we do. I try to keep the templates really brief. They shouldn't take more than 15 to 30 minutes to outline either a character or a quest, and then that can be reviewed by the rest of the writing team. So we have Jesse Moore, Colin McComb, Craig Ritchie, and me on the narrative team, and we give each other feedback on everything. And then once it's in Odyssey, we'll either go in and look in Odyssey and see what the graph is like, and sometimes say, oh, I think this is not meant to connect there, or I love how you did this. And then we play the game. We play each other's content, and we see what it feels like as a player to experience what the other person has written. And we get a lot of our new kind of tones of voice that way. It's really enjoyable to write something in Odyssey and, maybe I'm not quite sure about how I want this character to sound. And then Colin will come in with a piece of feedback and say, oh, I thought that she could say this or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, actually, that really solidifies who she is and what she's been through. So it's a very collaborative, iterative process that requires a lot of time. But as Colin said, communication is absolutely key.
Yeah, and you may have gathered by my accent, I am not Australian. So, I can write something. Leanne comes in, she plays it, she's like, oh, I get what you're saying here, comes in, Aussie-fies it, and suddenly it's hilarious. And I'm like, oh my God. Yeah.
Turns into bone.
No, turns into an Australian. Or is that the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's see. So I spend obviously a lot of time on the internet. I go to the various government websites. I dig in. When we were doing our research for Corda, I dug really deep into the Noongar community and started learning a lot about that. And one of the most fascinating things I learned, which I didn't know before, is that Indigenous Australians have been there for like 40 to 60,000 years, which is longer than humanity has been able to travel across large pieces of ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did such a large mass of people cross someplace 60 miles of a strait without knowing that there is land on the other side? Yeah, and then, there's also the Australian attitude, which is like sort of semi-defensive, mockery, ironic, always deeply hilarious in the background, and you're never sure if you're getting your leg pulled.
Have you had gecko egg sushi? You got to try it. Gecko egg sushi.
Piss off.
Not Vegemite. The main thing that I missed. I did have some, and I actually, before I left Australia, I never ate Vegemite. And then after about 7 years overseas, I was like, you know what I could really go for? That's a really good question. Cadbury dairy milk is different in Canada than it is in Australia. I miss the apples in Canada, though. I need to go to Stanthorpe nearby to get my apple fix. I don't know. I missed, you know what? I missed the sunsets and I missed the open sky because apparently it's an illusion, but when you come here, there is just so much space above you. And living in Montreal, we were not downtown, we were in Mile End, so there were buildings around, but they weren't huge high-rises or anything, but it still just felt so much smaller. And here, when the sun is setting and you get that play of colors all the way across from one horizon to the other, I love it. I think it's important to know that the people of Broken Roads don't know what happened. They know that about 100 years ago, there were a lot of explosions, and then there was no internet. And then Australia, which has most of its industries offshore, was in a pretty bad place.
They do know that there were bombs. They know that there was global warming and ecological catastrophes. They know that there was a ton of civil unrest. And they know that the rest of the world went through what they call World War shit. And then people started dying. A lot of people died. Yep.
But nuclear winter in the Northern Hemisphere doesn't necessarily mean so much for the middle of Australia.
But we do know what happened, and in fact, Leanne has come up with a very, very detailed explanation of what happened and the time, the exact time.
Put it in your clocks. Yeah. It's October 4th, 3 p.m. in 2036. That's the time of the apocalypse in our world.
I'm super excited to have Leanne on board because A, she's awesome, B, she's super organized, and C, she is so dedicated and smart and just really into games of all varieties. It's, you know, just a really great perspective to have that there, you know, sort of saying, hey, Colin, pay attention to this. And I'm like, oh my God, okay, yes, I will. You know, I was on the project before Leanne showed up. And actually, Craig was looking for a narrative lead, hopefully one who was Australian. I was like, do I know any writers who are Australians? And I was like, oh, Leanne, do you want to go back to Australia by any chance? And I introduced her and Craig, and I think it may have been the best thing I have done on this project.
It was very enjoyable. Craig and I had philosophical discussions before I joined the project. Of course, Colin was already on it, so that was a major draw for me because Colin is so wildly imaginative and brings such delight to his work. It's really a pleasure to see when he comes up with a new idea. His whole face lights up and he gets really animated and has so much energy, and I'm meanwhile sitting here being like, I know, it's hot. But I think one thing that I really enjoyed, because we worked together on Torment, but it was a little bit more of a long-distance relationship, I guess we could say, because we had Adam and George and some other people. And so Colin and I mostly just chatted about things in a very roundabout way. So I got a lot of my feedback from Adam. And working more closely together on this has been so much fun because we've discovered things about our work processes that are complementary but very different. So I start small and I scope up, and Colin starts big and then he scopes down. And it's fascinating to me because I come from a very practical background. I always want to make sure that I can do everything that I set out to do, and then I'll add sprinkles on top if I have time. And so I don't always have that capacity to dream as far and as wide as I want to. And that's something that I love about Colin, is that he just comes out with these things that are amazing and elaborate and, you know, galaxy spanning narratives. And I'm like, there's a guy and he likes books. So
yeah. Yeah. And, you know, sometimes it's like, okay, it's not really possible. You got to just start learning how to condense it down, what can be sacrificed. And sometimes I wish I could start small and, you know, accrete, as opposed to the big, and then like, well, this baby doesn't need an arm.
Oh,
Well,
no. That's it. Like I've got a tree and I'm like, okay, little bonsai, go in this direction. Oh, look, you're flowering. It's beautiful. But meanwhile, Colin's got this entire old growth oak forest and he's like, I love every tree. What can I do? I need to build a boat.
yeah. Oh dear. Well, I guess I'd better burn some of it.
Setting it on fire is normally the answer and was the name of our GDC panel, so.
That's right.
Hmm.
Let's see. Disco Elysium obviously is one of the big ones. You know, it's the sort of sense of anarchic freedom that sort of wove throughout the whole thing is something that we really wanted to put in here, and then also combine that with the philosophical background and exploration of life in general from Torment. You know, was something we wanted to do, and then Tyranny. Had the, you know, what if you were evil? And so that's always sort of been, you know, we had a joint playthrough of Tyranny, and, you know, just for us to say, okay, let's think about things that evil people can do.
James and I played through, James, my husband, who is the gameplay animator on our project, played through Divinity Original Sin 2 all the way in hour-long blocks during our work days. So it took us quite a while. But it was a fascinating game with lots of different ways of storytelling, and I enjoyed the narratives that each of the main characters had. So we don't have that in Broken Roads. You have pretty much a blank slate character that you can make whoever you want. They have an origin, but that doesn't determine who they are, even though there might be some elements of things that they're going to come across that relate to that background. It's not as driven as the narrative of Divinity Original Sin 2. And as Colin says, mostly life, thinking about philosophy. One of the things that I love is playing a chaotic evil character in tabletop games. I am the worst player. I will mess up everything because I just do strange things and I'm mean to people. And that doesn't work in video games. So Baldur's Gate 1 is very, very difficult to complete if you're evil because you just get attacked on sight. So basically the end experience where Sarabok has turned everyone against you and you go to Baldur's Gate and the Flaming Fist is attacking you all the time, any moment they see you. It's like that just for the whole game if you're evil. And yet the evil companions is so interesting and so much fun. And so that really influences my approach to Broken Roads where, you know, Craig always says Machiavellian isn't evil. It can be very protective. It's about my team. And nihilism is about me. He has a really great breakdown of who's the focus of each of the types of philosophy. And thinking about things in that way is so freeing because you're no longer saying, well, this is a bad person and this is a good person. You're saying these are two people who have a difference of opinion and they're both right. So what can we do in this situation where every option is the correct option if you're a type of person that thinks that way? It's fascinating. It's really, really fun.
In our particular case, it's setting it back in the birthplace of essentially post-apoc is, you know, in Australia. You know, basically, you know, where we're setting the game has not been filled up with a lot of heavy industry. It's not a place where there's, you know, we're not setting this in a city like most post-apoc games, you know, have you running through ruins of downtowns and so forth. We're not having a huge irradiated zone where there's strange mutants lumbering out of the mist, hungry for your blood.
What? You lied to me?
So our challenges have been, how are people actually going to rebuild after a post-apocalypse? Are people going to be strapping on their leathers and their spikes and riding around in gas-guzzling vehicles when they don't have the means to import oil anymore or refine gasoline?
Yep.
How are people going to actually survive, especially in a place that's basically inhospitable like Australia, without adapting to the environment?
I think it's also that the middle of Australia, and to some extent I would also say small towns in America, although Colin can confirm, feel a little bit sometimes like they're trapped in time, that they're, you know, 20 or 30 years behind the big cities where there's all this technology and all of these rapid changes, and then you have these small communities that have existed for maybe 100, 150 years, and nothing really changes much. You know, you get a landline telephone, and then eventually you might get the internet like the NBN, but on a day-to-day, I don't know how much it changes or how quickly it changes. So we're kind of taking a place that is already a little bit out of step with time, and much of it hasn't changed. And I think that's a really great facet of good sci-fi, is it looks at an existing situation and says, let's change one thing and see what happens. And so we've got the outback and the people who live there, who have always lived there, who have had to struggle to live there. How much does it change their lives for there to have been an apocalypse? Maybe not that much. It changes that they don't drive gas guzzling cars because they can't get petrol, and petrol does have an expiry date. It doesn't last forever. So they're making do with what does last forever. And that raises questions of what are those things and how would they use them?
And how do they protect them from the people who are fleeing from the cities where all of their modern conveniences have just been destroyed?
Mm-hmm.
And what does that do when you suddenly realize, okay, I've actually got to protect my town against, because if we let these people take everything, we're all going to die.
Or how far are you willing to go to protect, like, not your way of life, but in a way, how far are you willing to go to protect yourselves against the people that normally you would help? And Australians do have a reputation overseas for being people who will help out anyone who's in trouble. And that has to be turned on its head, because otherwise, as Colin says, there are in our world places where they helped everyone, and those places don't exist anymore.
There's many different ways. There's the ordinary, just sort of, oh, I'm coming up with an idea, and going for a walk around the block can help. There's the longer term ones of, oh my God, I'm, the usual artistic feel of the dark depression crashing down on you, and suddenly you're a miserable failure at everything. And that's basically, again, go for a walk around the block, change the scenery, do some exercise, eat better, and
sleep.
Sleep is pretty important. Not too much sleep. But yeah, it's just basically taking care of yourself.
That's a good point. It's hard to be creative when you're feeling run down, or if you don't feel good about yourself. I am one of those people who gets inspired to write when I'm depressed, because it's how I deal with my emotions, but that's not sustainable long term. And it turns out if you have therapy, you lose one of your major muses, and then you have to figure out how you can still write. There are still things I want to understand about the world, and so I examine those. If I get stuck with an idea, I go for a walk. I think about it. I think about why I might be stuck. I think about things that might be making me stuck, whether it's an assumption or a previous experience, because we all have those comments that people have made about our work that just hang around in the back of your head for years and years, and then come out when you get excited about something, or when you think you've come up with something original, you start to really question yourself. So just going for a walk, talking to that voice and saying, okay, but why are you here? What am I thinking about? What am I worried about? And can I resolve this in a way that's going to make me happy and hopefully productive? But also the main thing that I do is I just write. I just get in there and I write documentation, I write an email, I start a conversation. And even if all of the nodes that I write say, this dialogue sucks, this dialogue also sucks, I'm doing the physical act of hooking up a conversation. I'm doing the physical act of typing, and often that's enough to make me go, oh, actually, it would be neat if he said this here. And then if he said that, the player could say this, and these 5 other things the player might want to say. And then before I know it, I'm working anyway.
Yeah, that's to piggyback on that, it's super important not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That's really the major blocking point for me, is you're writing something like, oh, this sucks, this is garbage, I'm the worst. Oh, hey, you remember that person on the internet who said you were the worst? Man, they were right. And it's yeah, you know what? I don't care, it's going on the page. And,
that's right.
It's just getting past that and saying, it doesn't have to be perfect on the first time. It just has to be the first time.
That's right. And so as game writers, so much of what we do, there's a joke that says your first draft has to also be your final draft, because we don't always have time to go back and revise. And that can feel very challenging if you start thinking, but what if this ends up in the game? And so it also comes down to having some respect for your own ability and enjoying yourself. If you enjoy yourself while you're writing, it's probably going to be good quality because you're having a good time, and that's going to come through. And also, sometimes I just go back and I play my own conversations, and, you know, I'll laugh because I forgot that I put a joke in there, or it just reads differently to me now than it did 3 months ago, or things like that. So trying to remind yourself, yeah, I have this job for a reason, or I'm doing this for a reason if you're just starting out. And you, as a consumer of media, are also a scholar of media. So it's not like people are coming in with a blank slate and trying to be a writer from nothing. You're coming from somewhere, you're trying to get somewhere, and that's an important process, and you need to trust that you can complete it.
Well, let's see. Shipping Torment Tides of Numenera. Man, that was amazing. That was 5 years of work for a lot of time. Also ran a couple of marathons, and I got a black belt. So those are 3 things, I guess, that I'm proud of. But the thing I am really proudest of is, this is going to sound super cliche and corny, but I got 2 awesome kids, and I love them to pieces. So,
I mean, like Colin, I have 2 children and they're amazing. Also, they're not here right now, so I don't have to talk about them. But I enjoy being in both the academic world and being in the video game world, because it's not that common. And honestly, I have gotten a bit of flack from people in the industry saying, oh, you're just an academic. But that's not true. I am an academic and a writer, and I continue to write academically on this topic. I continue to publish on this topic. And so each of those chapters is something I'm very proud of, because it showcases so much of what I've learned between each chapter that I write. And it allows me to get my thoughts out there and my processes out there for other people who want to do what I do. Because when I started, it was all reverse engineering. It was playing video games and then figuring out how to do it yourself alone. And there are so many more tools now. And mentorship is great. I love it. I love helping people become writers or figure out that that's not what they want to do, because not everyone wants to be or needs to be a writer. So that kind of thing is what I'm most proud of, my contributions, hopefully, to the industry and helping other people do what we do, because I think it is one of the most privileged jobs in the industry to be able to create stories that are hopefully going to change other people's lives the way that Planescape Torment changed mine. What an honor. Make games.
Yeah.
Make as many games as you can, as fast as you can, so that you can learn as quickly as you can. I use RPG Maker, and I can put together a game in half an hour, and then it's hosted on my website. Everyone can play it, and I'm done with it, because normally I have a mechanic or one idea that I want to explore, and I just do it, and then it's out of my system. And if I want to use it again, I can. It's not like you develop a mechanic and then go, oh no, it's been done. It's published now. I can never have that mechanic in another game. Everything that you do is going to make you a better writer and a better developer. And getting feedback on it is also really important, even though it's scary. Getting people to play it, even if they come back, as some people have to mine, with a resounding, that's still feedback. Lack of feedback is also feedback.
Yeah, read, write, and play. It's, you know, very short answer, just, you know, keep doing it. If you want to know more about how to do the job, then see how other people do the job. And then practice doing the job yourself. And
criticize the things you love.
Yeah.
It's very easy to sit down and watch or play something that is like comfort food, but you're not actually taking in anything of it. You're not thinking, why did they do it this way? Why do I love it so much? And that can be deeply personal, or it can just be that it's very well crafted. And in either case, you're going to learn something.
Right. Yeah. And by criticize, not like oh, well, this is dumb. And yeah, you know, because I think the world's got enough negativity. Take the things that you love apart to see why you love them, and then put them back together again in a different way.